The air in the room doesn't just carry a scent. It carries a memory. It's a thick velvet weight on your skin, a marriage of ancient frankincense and the oily, crackling smoke of coffee beans on the coals. You feel the warmth, the heat. Before you've even taken a sip of the already made coffee, that atmosphere has already told your nervous system to do something we've almost forgotten how to do. Exhale. In my culture, the Ethiopian coffee ceremony is the reverse of the modern grab-and-go existence. It isn't a quick transaction. It isn't a drive-through window at Starbucks or a quick chemical jolt to help you survive a Monday. It is a ritual of cultural expression. I want you to imagine the rhythmic clink of a wooden stir on a metal pan, or in my native language, Amharic, matabasha, as the green beans turn to a shimmering, oily black. You hear the laughter of aunts and cousins, and inevitably, you hear the loud, passionate arguments over things that do not matter. Why my cousin isn't married by 30, or why my native language, Amharic, sounds like a glitching GPS. They'll spend hours making fun of how I pronounce a single vowel. Mind you, I have lived in America for 16 years of my life. I was bound to form an accent, okay? There is one fundamental portion to this ritual, however. You cannot rush it. If you try to cheat the clock, if you try to force the heat or skip a step, you don't just ruin the coffee, you ruin the connection. And let me tell you, if you serve a bad pot of coffee to a room full of Ethiopians, you're getting a bad review for a whole year. I've done it before, and I promise you the judgment in that room is heavier than that smoke. The ceremony isn't just about the caffeine, though, although very important. It's about the slow brew. A slow brew is the intentional choice to prioritize the present or the person over the clock. It's the belief that some things like understanding, trust, and seeing another human being cannot be rushed or optimized. They require the heat, the manual labor, and the time to actually sit and talk with the person across from you. But we don't live in a slow brew world anymore, do we? We are living in a state of chronic, high-definition exhaustion. We have these invisible filters, the podcasts we listen to that reverberate exactly what we believe, or the one that I know all of you guys do, the mute button you hit the second somebody says something that makes you uncomfortable. It's like we've lost all patience for things we can't control or predict. And when we lose that willingness to handle the unpredictable parts of a human being, we start reaching for labels that a conversation could have fixed. We don't see a coworker. We see a diversity hire or a set of pronouns. We don't see a neighbor. We see a voter for the other side. We've traded our humanity for a script. And I'm not an expert up here trying to lecture you. I'm right there in the trenches with you. Just the other day, I saw somebody I knew in the frozen food aisle. And instead of using the art of conversation, I used what I call the art of tactical stealth. I spent 4 minutes ducking behind a pillar of organic broccoli just to avoid the "how are you" script. I spent my time behind this aisle, this specific aisle as well, hiding from a human being. And for a second, I will be honest, I thought I was winning at life. We do this because the script is safe. It's predictable. It's a silent social contract that says, I won't challenge you if you don't challenge me. We do this because it keeps us from being seen, and I would argue, more importantly, it keeps us from being seen towards others. For me, that meant building a version of myself that was basically impossible to criticize. It wasn't just about fitting in, it was about becoming as small and as professional as possible so that I could remain invisible. It's a specific kind of survival, being a ghost or a nice person because it feels like a shield. But I've realized that facade, that performance, can't build a bridge we need to dismantle bias and encourage understanding with one another. Everything I thought I knew about the safety of being nice was tested at 9 p.m. on a Saturday night at the Marriott front desk. Now, if you've ever worked the night shift at a hotel, let me tell you, only the strongest survive. Let me set the scene. It's a twilight zone of human interaction. By hour 10, the lobby lights feel like heat lamps and you're breaking a sweat. Your feet have lost all feeling and you're gonna size up because they're throbbing so much. And you're basically a kiosk with a pulse. As I was standing behind the front desk, a guest walked up to check in, and we did what I called the receptionist dance. ID, credit card, the elevator is to your left pitch. But then he leaned in, gave me that look, the one where they're trying to read your soul instead of your name tag, and asked, "So, where are you really from?" "Ethiopia," I said, and he beamed. He was smiling ear to ear, I kid you not. And then he said, "Wow, you speak English really well for someone that's not born here." Usually, I would just offer a tight smile, say, "Thank you," and go back to being that same ghost. But that night, something inside me clicked. I realized that every time I followed that script, every time I let a comment like that slide to keep another person comfortable, I was participating in my own disappearance. I was letting another's assumption define who I am. So, I took a risk. I looked him in the eye and I said, "I know you mean that as a compliment, but when you say that, it actually makes me feel like I do not belong here." The lobby went dead silent. But I stood there, finally visible. I braced for the usual, the "you're too sensitive" or the "I'm not racist" defense. But that didn't come, because I spoke from my own perspective within that conversation. Instead of attacking his character, we had a dialogue that was honest. And then he stopped, and he said, "I have never thought about it that way. I am so sorry." That was the moment these labels, the script fell. The receptionist became Afomiya. The guest became Mark. We stopped just occupying the space and finally started sharing it with one another. That is the power of a real conversation. It doesn't just exchange information, it restores our humanity. I had realized I had brought the coffee ceremony into the lobby that day. I used it to move beyond the surface and actually connect with Mark. I think of this framework as the slow brew, as I mentioned to you guys earlier. But this is a 3-part process: the roast, the grind, and finally, the pour. The first stage is the roast, truly embracing the heat. In the ceremony, you can't have coffee without the fire. And in conversation, that means the truthful sentence. Most of us are terrified of the heat. We think that in naming our reality, our perspective, we'll start a fire we can't put out. But a bean can only keep its secret for so long. It needs the heat to finally turn its potential into something we can actually taste. When I told Mark how I felt, I was letting the smoke of my reality as an immigrant fill the room. Yes, it was so uncomfortable. I was itching everywhere, I promise you. But that uncomfortability is what led my mask, my facade, to finally melt. Sometimes you have to be the one that's willing to turn up the temperature. The second stage is the grind, the manual, sometimes tiring work of high-quality listening. You can't just throw whole beans in a pot, you have to break them down. And in conversation, that means grinding down your own ego. I see the necessity of this every day as an intern at the South Dakota Department of Corrections, sitting across from people who have been filed and categorized away. In those rooms, the scripts are thick. And naturally, our brain wants to build a fortress to keep our own perspectives safe. But according to social psychologist Kenneth D. Marie, they state within their high-quality listening article that this specific kind of presence, this high-quality listening, is what allows others to consider perspectives they otherwise would not. It is the difficult manual labor of realizing that we all come from different walks of life, and that the person in front of you is just as real as you are. The third and final stage is the pour, choosing connection over winning. In the ceremony, we don't just pour one cup, we pour 3 or so rounds. And in conversation, that is the choice to stay in the room, even if it gets difficult. I think we've all been there, standing in our kitchen at 2 a.m., hearts racing, thinking of a perfect comeback to an argument that ended 3 hours ago. We should have just gave it up at that point. We want to win so badly, we don't realize we're arguing with a toaster. But if your goal is to win, you've spilled the coffee and probably burned yourself in the process. If your goal is to pour, however, you've created a bridge. Mark stayed for the second pour. He stayed until the bitterness settled and the connection became smooth. But let's be real, I'm not suggesting that every interaction you have with someone doesn't have to be a soul-searching deep dive, no. I mean, if I'm at a bank, I don't want a slow brew moment with the teller, I just want to know if my check cleared. And since I'm a university student, the answer is usually no, so yeah. The problem isn't that we have these shallow conversations, it's that we've forgotten how to swim deeper when it actually matters with one another. I know I'm not naive. I know real life isn't a Hallmark movie where the piano music starts cueing and we all hug it out. But sometimes, yes, you offer a 5-star connection, a slow brew moment with that person, and all they want is just a vending machine. The pour isn't just about them and changing them. It's about changing the space between you. It's the moment you stop being a reflection of their coldness and start being the source of your own warmth. It's the moment you are done being a ghost. You stay in the room and offer your presence, not because they've earned it, but because that is who you've chosen to be. As a Black immigrant woman navigating a majority white state, I know what it feels like to be a perception or an assumption rather than a person. But I also know that one honest moment can chip away at years of bias. Bridging our divides can start small. After a shift, over a cup of coffee, the next time you feel the urge to hide, take a step, embrace the roast, speak your truth, your truthful sentence, even if your voice shakes. Do the work of the grind. Let your defenses break down so that you can hear the perspectives of others, their lives, their experiences, their opinions, and complete the pour. Stay in the room even if you feel uncomfortable so that you can have meaningful conversation with the person across from you. We don't need more nice ghosts. We need more smoke. We need people willing to stay in the room and hold that space until it is honest. I can still smell the frankincense. I can still feel the warmth, the heat, the weight of the smoke. Let's bring that weight, that presence back into our world. Thank you.